Annyeong, bonjour, hola, hi. Welcome back to Malia's room, which is just me yapping about things from my room. Aujourd'hui, nous parlons du film Friday the 13th. Today we're talking about the movie Friday the 13th, specifically Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. I didn't know that this existed. I'm not really a huge Friday the 13th fan, but when I saw that they were re-releasing it in theaters, I just had to go and see what was going on. Okay, so the film starts with this married couple, Edna and Harold. They own a roadside market, and they're the first kills in the movie. While Edna's watching TV, she hears the news about the murders that were committed in the lake region, which I'm assuming she lives in or near the lake region. And this is just to give the audience this background on, I guess, who Jason Voorhees is and the setting of the movie. Once we hear about the report of the murders, Edna goes out to scold her husband, Harold, who she thinks is out in the front yard where all of their clothes are hung up to dry. What she says is not really relevant, but I'm pretty sure that's not Harold. Jason eventually ends up in their house. Do I know how? Not really. Is it relevant? Not at all. He ends up in the house, and Harold is the first to go. Harold gets killed in the bathroom. Disgusting. I distinctly remember while I was watching it, he was doing a number 2, and that man did not wipe. Disgusting. Shortly after Harold is killed, Edna goes and she does the typical horror movie or scary movie thing. She's like, Harold. Bro, if I call you twice and you don't answer, I'm not calling you more than that. Long story short, Edna ends up in the bathroom and she also gets murdered. After Harold and Edna are, we cut to new characters, Chris, Andy, Shelley, and Debbie, I think. Andy and Debbie are a couple, and Chris is trying to set Shelley up on a date. Now, this is where I feel it's important to let y'all know that Shelley is a fucking weirdo. Shelley is seen walking up behind Andy, Debbie, and Chris in a mask with a fake knife, and he pretends to stab Andy in the back with the knife, and then laugh and say, oh, it was a joke, it's funny. Right. And this is only the first thing that he does. He does many more odd and just like suspicious things. Debbie, Andy, Shelley, and Chris end up at the door, and the person that comes out is named Vera. Vera is the person that is supposed to go on a date with Shelley. And when she finds out Shelley's the one that she set up on a date with, she has a reaction that I would say is lackluster because he still had the mask on while they were being introduced. What do you mean we're supposed to go on a date and you look like a murderer? And you think it's funny? No. Immediately no. Next, all the characters are back at the van. They think it's on fire. It's not on fire. There's actually just people inside ripping bongs. Their names are Chili and Chuck. They're not really that important in the movie. They just act as the stereotypical potheads, and they get killed. Nothing special. So now, Andy, Debbie, Shelley, Chris, the 2 potheads, and Vera are on their way to a lake house. A couple things happen on their ride to the lake house. For one, they think the cops are pulling them over because they have weed. The cops don't care at all about what they're doing. They're actually pulling up to the crime scene where Harold and Edna were, taken out. The second thing that happens is there's a man lying down in the middle of the road, and they stop the car and they get out to check on him, and he's holding an eyeball and warning them basically to not go to the lake house. Do they listen? Of course not. Now, along this journey, we've been getting hints that something traumatic has happened to, what's her name, Chris, but we don't really know exactly what. She's just very hypervigilant and jumpy. Everyone pulls up to the lake house, they get out of the car, and everyone but Chris goes to, have fun. Chris decides to take her bags out and put them in the house, and she gets the creeps like if someone's watching her. And then we are introduced to another character named Rick. Rick basically jump scares her, and then immediately after tries to start making out with her. She pushes him off, she's angry, and he does not give a damn. He's really, throughout this whole movie, he pisses me off, and I was so happy when he was, because it seems all he's there for is to hook up. Mind you, Chris has clearly been traumatized, and he's just like, oh, why don't you want to kiss me? Why don't you want to, be intimate with me? We should take this is an actual line that he says. We should take 3 hours of each day to meet our needs. If you get what I mean. He also just calls Chris a tease for literally existing. Like she literally does not do anything. And he calls her a tease and talks about, oh, I won't be able to take cold showers forever. Mind you, like I said, everyone just got there. She just pulled up. You're a weirdo. Also, if you're wondering, Rick is supposed to be obviously Chris's love interest. They seem to have some history. Again, I don't know about it. I didn't watch Friday the 13th Part 2, but they seem basically in modern day terms like a situationship. Once everyone is like pretty much settled at the lake house, Shelly just decides he doesn't want peace. He wants problems. Now, like I said earlier, Shelly finds it funny and entertaining to pretend to be a murderer or a victim of murder. So, in his latest and greatest attempt to piss everyone off, in my opinion, but what he deems to be comedic, he pretends to have an axe stuck into his head and be dead on the floor. And everyone runs because they heard a scream. They find him. They're all terrified. And his friend, Andy, goes and starts tickling him, and Shelly starts laughing, and everyone's pissed off because what do you mean? You pretended to be murdered with an axe as a joke when everyone was settled in and having a peaceful, quaint little time. You're a weirdo. I do want to clarify that when I say weirdo, I do not mean that everyone who's weird is a bad person. I mean that this person is weird and he's also a bad person, in my opinion. Like, I mean weird derogatory, if you get my gist. Now, Vera, remember, is Shelly's date. She is not pleased with this at all. She says, actually, I want to leave to get some things. And she takes the car, she gets in the car, she drives off, and Shelly pouts and is like, let me come with you. Me, personally, I would have said, fuck no. But, of course, Vera's like, fine, she gives in, and I don't know why, but she does. They drive to a supermarket. They come across what is supposed to be considered a biker gang. I'm sorry, but 3 people does not make a gang. And of course, 2 of them are black, 1 of them is white. 2 of them are men, 1 of them is a woman. They're in the supermarket, and Vera is trying to pay for, her stuff, and the cashier very rudely and disgustingly says, we don't take food stamps here. And I was gagged because I didn't mention this earlier, but Vera is a Hispanic woman. So why did the cashier feel the need to say we don't take food stamps when speaking to the Hispanic woman? If you know, you know. Vera tells Shelly that she needs some money. Shelly tosses her the wallet. Vera does not catch the wallet. One of the members in the biker gang picks it up. It's a woman. And I guess they're just aura farming. This biker gang, they're just fucking aura farming. The woman's name is Fox, and she basically just waits for Vera to ask nicely for the wallet back, which Vera does not do until she's told to. And Fox makes Vera say, and I quote, "May I please have the wallet, ma'am?" Which is crazy to me. But this is obviously supposed to be racial tension. I don't think it's effective or good, but it's definitely there. So after this tension, Vera and Shelly leave the supermarket, and Vera tells Shelly to drive instead of her driving because she's too angry and she thinks they'll get into an accident if she drives. Where was that energy when you were in front of Foxy, though? And like, I'm just, let me stop being an instigator. So Shelly gets in the driver's seat, and you would think this guy has never driven a day in his life before, because instead of, driving off, he reverses the car and accidentally hits the motorcycles of the motorcycle gang. And another member of the gang sees this and gets angry and goes and punches out his windows. This character from the biker gang, his name is Ali. And after punching out the windows, Shelly decides he's big, bad, and bold, and he decides to try to hit, I think, Ali with his car. How did we get here? I don't know, but after this unnecessary and honestly drawn out scene, we cut to Vera and what's his name, Shelly, back at the lake. And the owner of the car, because if I didn't mention this earlier, Vera and Shelly don't own this car. This car is owned by Rick, the guy that I said was creepy and like a red flag. They pull back up and Rick is like, what the hell happened to my car? He didn't say that exactly, but that's basically what he said. And Shelly and Vera are like, hey, sorry guy, it wasn't our fault. That's not an explanation. If I give you my car and you come back with my windows busted, I expect a full detailed story. What do you mean? After seeing this, Rick is like, oh, I'm just gonna leave. Like, I didn't sign up for this, to Chris. Now, guys, what does Chris have to do with Rick's car windows being busted out? Absolutely nothing. This is called being manipulative. And it definitely works on Chris because she's like, no, stay. And Rick is like, why? And Chris is like, because I want you to. And Rick is like, oh, you don't play fair. What is this dialogue and why? Why? Now, at this point in the movie, everyone basically splits off. The two potheads split off. Debbie and Andy split off. Chris and Rick split off. And then Shelly and Vera are stuck together, basically. Now, we get what I feel like is another unnecessary scene. I honestly think the whole biker gang is an unnecessary part of the movie. They're not good representation of black people. And they're also not a gang. 3 people does not make a gang. I think I said that already, but I really... Anyways, the sole purpose of this quote-unquote gang is to act as secondary antagonists to the main characters. And I just feel like if you know, you know. So the biker gang followed Shelly and Vera back to the lake house, and the leader of the gang, Ali, the one that punched the windows out, he decides to siphon the gas out from the van that Chris basically drove everyone to the lake house in. And this is literally what I think is the only important part of this whole like side story and these secondary antagonists. They're the reason that later on in the movie Chris can't get away in her van because they siphoned out her gas and the car stops. That's literally all they do for the story. After this, they get killed. Foxy didn't want to siphon the gas, but Ollie's in charge. So she just goes off wandering the lake house or whatever this area is called. Which I find weird because stumbling onto the property of, and just like free roaming, and that you're beefing with them from the supermarket is kind of crazy to me. But she doesn't give a damn. She goes into, I think it's a shed or whatever it's called. I don't know. I'm not from the country. She goes in there, she starts exploring, and lo and behold, she ends up murdered. Yes. While I don't remember his name. I think it starts with an L. We'll just call him L. While Elle and Ollie are siphoning the gas, Foxy was exploring and she got murdered. And Ollie tells Elle to go find Foxy because they need to leave now. Elle goes to find Foxy and he finds her dead body. And then he also gets murdered. Ollie's like, what's taking these guys so long? He goes to the shed or whatever it's called, and he's like, hey, don't you guys hear me talking to you? He does the same stereotypical thing where he calls out the person's name 3 to 5 times with no response, and then continues to start looking for them. Couldn't be me. Ollie finds Elle's dead body, and he gets attacked by Jason, but he's not dead somehow. Mind you, while all of this is happening, none of the other characters know that this is happening. How? I'm not entirely sure, but this is just movie logic. It doesn't really matter. The 2 potheads, Andy and Debbie, are like reunited. They're not doing anything important, but they're basically in each other's vicinity again. And then we cut to Chris and Rick. And this is just Chris explaining to Rick why she's so traumatized. And the story goes, she was out late on a date with Rick, actually. Came back home super late. Her parents were mad at her. They cursed at her. Her mama slapped her, which, I mean, how late is late, you know? And being petty and angry, she decides, I'm gonna run off into the woods and stay out there overnight to make my parents feel bad for disciplining me. Girl, how the fuck would you do that? Like, respectfully, there are other safer ways to piss your parents off than going into the woods at night and staying out there. Like, what type of sense does that make? And obviously in this encounter, or this situation I should say, she encounters Jason. She doesn't know who he is, obviously, but she's basically chilling in the woods. Mind you, also, rainy and cold woods. Girl, if you don't go home and go to bed, basically while she's sleeping under a tree, willingly, this man comes up to her, starts attacking her. And I vividly remember when I was watching this in theaters, she described him as grotesque, so ugly to the point he was almost non-human. Now, if you don't know what lookism is, if I can, I'll insert a definition. I don't feel like looking one up right now, but to summarize it, it's basically discriminating against people that don't seem or don't look stereotypically attractive. And I remember thinking, hey, he kind of looks like that guy from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. If you know, you know. I think I can show you guys if I insert something. If I don't, just look it up. But long story short, she gets attacked by this guy. She gets knocked unconscious, and she somehow wakes up in her bedroom, and her parents proceed to act like nothing ever happened and do not explain to her how she got back to her room, which I find insane, to say the least. Because what do you mean your daughter went missing in the middle of the night and a man took her and now she's back in her bed? Call the cops. So she explains all of this to Rick. Rick is like the stereotypical thing that men do. Oh, it's okay, you're safe now, like you're with me. Okay. In case I haven't already mentioned this, Rick and Chris drove away from the campsite, and all of a sudden his car battery dies, so now they have to walk back to the campsite. Next, we cut to a scene of Andy and Shelly having a juggling match, where Debbie basically insinuates that if Andy loses, they can go, you know, woohoo. So of course Andy loses, and him and Debbie skirt off. Chili and whatever the other pothead's name is, they also skirt off somewhere, I'm assuming, to, you know, hit that. And now Shelly awkwardly says to Vera, I guess it's just us now. Is that a threat? Shelly proceeds to basically confess to Vera. Mind you, this was a date that Chris set up. They did not know each other beforehand. This is literally the first day that they've interacted. And Shelly's like, oh, I think I like you. Raggy, do you even know her middle name if she has one? No. So Vera, understandably so, she's like, stop right there. Just completely cuts him off. And she's like, not happening. I'm gonna go outside though. When I come back, we can talk about it. And Shelly looks noticeably disappointed, and Vera leaves, and Shelly, under his breath, calls her a bitch. Wow, way to handle rejection. I know what you are. Vera, like I said, she left the cabin, and she goes and sits on the dock, and somehow there's someone pulling on her leg from under the water. And as an audience, you're thinking, oh, is that Jason? I'll give you half a second to guess who it is. It's Shelly. Was that half a second? Maybe not. Sorry. So, Shelly again thinks it's so funny. It'd be so funny to pretend to try to pull Vera under the water. Call the cops. And Vera realizes that it's Shelly, and she's like, why are you such a jerk? And Shelly's like, oh, I just want you to like me. How does... Wait a damn minute, bro. You think someone's gonna like you when all you've done is actively make them uncomfortable and scared? What's wrong with you? I distinctly remember also, Shelly says, and I quote, being a jerk is better than being a nothing. I have no words for that, honestly. I have none. So Shelly walks off. He decides to go to the shed. This is the same shed where the biker gang was either murdered or attacked. He goes in there and we see the iconic Jason Voorhees mask. And I went and I looked at some talks about this movie on Reddit, and apparently this is the movie where Jason gets his mask. Before this, he didn't have this iconic mask. So, what I am to take from this scene, Shelly is the reason Jason Voorhees has that mask that he has. Creep. And if you're confused by what I mean, after, pranking Vera, Shelly walks to the shed, like I said, and we see him holding the mask, like I said, and presumably he gets attacked by Jason while he's in the shed. We don't really see this, but it's heavily insinuated. So, yeah, Shelly being a creep, weirdo, contributed to Jason Voorhees having an iconic mask. Don't know how to feel about that, but it tracks that it tracks that it would be Shelly, doesn't it? It tracks. Now we cut back to Vera. Vera is still at the dock. She takes out Shelly's wallet, which she never gave back, by the way, which I find crazy. But she takes out his wallet. She starts looking at it. She sees an endearing picture of Shelly with his mother. I don't give a damn. You just pretended to drag me into the lake and kill me. Me seeing a picture of you with your mama is not going to endear me at all. You're weird. And do your mama know that you're weird? But anyways, Vera sees this. Somehow she accidentally drops the wallet in the lake, because of course she does. And as she's going to get it back, she sees who she thinks is Shelly in the mask walking up to her, and she tells him yo, and I think it's called a harpoon. He has a harpoon, and he's pointing it at her, and she's like, what are you doing? Stop, it's not funny. Someone in a mask is pointing a weapon at you, and you think they're joking? Anyway, so Vera gets shot in the head with the harpoon, and she's dead. Now we cut back to Debbie and Andy, who just finished woohooing. And Debbie's like, oh, I'm gonna go take a shower. Andy's like, oh, okay, I'll get us some beers. Now, I didn't mention this before because it's not relevant. It's still not really important to the story, but I just wanted to add my commentary, of course. Andy says he's going to get some beers. He asks Debbie if she wants one, and Debbie says yes. However, we found out early on in the movie that Debbie is pregnant. Do with that information what you will. So, while Debbie's in the shower, Andy's presumably off getting the beers, and for some reason he's walking on his arms instead of his legs. I didn't understand what the point of this was. I guess Andy's just supposed to be like a quirky guy, but he's actively walking around the cabin on his arms. So Jason appears, behind him and kills him. If I'm remembering correctly, Andy gets killed with a machete. And he's upside down, so the machete cuts right in the center, if you get what I mean. This is where I wanted to mention, I think it's the soundtrack, correct me if I'm wrong, but the of the theme of Jason is so creepy, and it's so good at building suspense and tension, and it's used very well throughout the whole film. Like that like that shit is creepy. That shit is creepy. So now Debbie is freshly showered. She's calling Andy, and she's doing that thing that I hate. Andy, oh, I don't want that beer anymore. Actually, I changed my mind. Andy, did you hear me? I don't want that beer. Girl, you called him more than 2 times. He did not answer. Stop looking for him. Stop calling him. Like, please. And why did you even say yes to the beer in the first place? I mean, I know I'm lingering on things that aren't important, but still, like, you included it in the movie. I'm gonna talk about it. Why did you include that Debbie was pregnant? And why did you include that Debbie was pregnant and willing to drink a beer and then decided not to? What was that about? Like, what the fuck? Also, something I wanted to add, this is out of order. Going back to when Debbie was taking a shower, there's a scene, a scene that looks just like the scene from Psycho, where the woman's in the shower and the guy is creeping up. It doesn't have, like, the stabbing scene, obviously, but it's a little nod to that movie, which I enjoyed. Now, back to what I was talking about. After Debbie is calling Andy, he doesn't respond. She goes back to their room. She lays down. She's looking through a magazine, and some red substance starts dripping onto the pages. She touches it. She's like, oh, where's that coming from? Girl, gravity. She looks up, and she sees Andy's dead body. And it's grotesque. I can't emphasize enough how gross it is. That man has been absolutely butchered, and his body is like, I don't even know how to describe it. It just is a horrific scene. Horrific. And before Debbie really has any time to react, Jason stabs her from under the bed through the chest, and she's dead. Now, if you're keeping up with the characters, which I wouldn't if I was you, because there's just so many of them, this leaves Chris, Rick, and the 2 potheads left. So now we're back to the pothead couple, Chili and Chuck. They're popping some popcorn, just vibing, and then all of a sudden the electricity in their cabin goes out. And Chuck goes down to, check it out. And something I want to make note of, this man is barefoot. He goes downstairs where he's stepping barefoot into dirty puddles of water. That's disgusting. Rick get back to the camp, and Chris smells something burning. They go into the cabin that Chili and Chuck were in, and they find a pot of burnt popcorn on the stove. And they start complaining, like, nice one, guys. And I'm just like, yeah, I would. Have you guys smelt burnt popcorn? That shit is disgusting. After seeing this, we cut to a scene where there's a bunch of police at the cabin site, or the campsite, I should say. And they're talking about how there's one survivor. Of course, it's Chris. She survived. And there's a police officer, I guess he's talking to his superior, and he's like, oh, but what was she talking about, a woman in the water, like a woman under the water in the lake? And the superior's like, oh, she's just probably in shock, she's been through a lot, like there's so many dead bodies here, she doesn't know what she's talking about, basically, is what he's saying. And talk about the cops never believing the victim, but that's a whole nother thing we can talk about, guys. So we see the cops escorting Chris to the car, presumably to get her some help at the hospital or whatever. And Chris has had a psychotic break very clearly. She's going from being hysterical to laughing to screaming in fear to looking very desensitized. She's just going through a lot, and you can tell mentally she's pretty broken. And this should be taken seriously, but I don't know, again, if it's the actor or the script. It was just funny as hell. It was just funny as hell. Everyone in the theater was laughing. And like I said, I don't know if it's the script or the actor, but it didn't seem like natural the way that she was switching between these emotions. It seemed very like, oh, I gotta show them that I'm like something's funny, very exaggerated, or I gotta show them that I'm having like flashbacks, so I'm really scared, or I have to show them that I'm hysterical and crazy. And it's like, it's more, oh, I have to emote this certain thing than, oh, this is the realistic way someone who's been through what I've been through would be emoting. I don't know if you'll understand what I mean by that, but to sum it up, it just wasn't the best. It was funny, and it wasn't supposed to be funny, and that's the end of the movie, basically. That's it. Chris survives. Everyone else died a gruesome death, and the cops are there, and they drive off, and we see Jason Voorhees' presumably dead body lying there, which confused me because where are the ambulances? Now, this is just me going on a tangent because, like I said, the movie's over, but it just didn't make sense to me. And again, movies don't really have to make sense because movie logic, you suspend reality, whatever. But if there's a crime scene, aren't there usually paramedics with the cops to, treat any injuries and do any life-saving measures that they can? There was not a singular ambulance there. And I was like, that's kind of insane. But again, it has to be just to continue the plot, because if there was an ambulance and they did check on Jason and they did see that he was dead, I guess it would have complicated the next part, because I think there is a part 4. But yeah, the police just left his dead body there, not covered or anything, no crime scene tape, nothing, just there. And obviously this is a nod to another movie because we know he's not dead. We just don't see him get up. And that's the end of Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. So now I'm going to do a little review and then a rating. Overall, I think this movie is definitely a horror movie, and I understand why other people like it so much in the Friday the 13th franchise, because it is the introduction to Jason Voorhees with his iconic mask. The kills were entertaining. The plot was enough to keep you interested, but not to take away from this just being a slasher movie. And the cinematography was pretty good. There were a lot of scenes where the characters the main characters were wearing bright colors that really contrasted with the environment, which helped you focus on them more. I also did like the 3D, although the 3D aspect was really dragged out. They really said, word, this movie's in 3D, so let's take a bunch of unnecessary shots of things that we can make 3D. For example, there's a scene where, what's his name? Andy is playing with a yo-yo, and we see the yo-yo in 3D, they make it look like the yo-yo is about to hit you in the face, and it's just completely unnecessary. He's sitting over Debbie, playing with the yo-yo, and almost hitting her in the face, and we are basically looking at that from Debbie's perspective and seeing it in 3D, and it adds completely nothing to the plot. There are also other scenes where Jason is killing people that are in 3D, which they are entertaining, I will say. But overall, the 3D aspect is literally just there for no reason. Like, it doesn't contribute anything to the story. There's not a lot of natural opportunities for something 3D. Like, it's not animated. So, for example, Casper the Friendly Ghost being 3D, that would contribute something because they're literally ghosts. So them looking like 3D ghosts would be pretty cool. But for a slasher film like this one, they're just looking for scenes to make 3D rather than having a useful, like, purpose for using 3D, if that makes sense. I know that probably is super nitpicky of me, but it's just something that I noted. Like, the 3D doesn't seem to add anything to the story or the plot or really the viewing experience. It's kind of just in 3D to say that it's in 3D. It doesn't do anything other than that. So now for my rating, I give this, I don't do half points. I give this a 2 out of 5, and I'll explain. The reason I give this movie 2 stars is because it's entertaining and the soundtrack is really good. I don't give it more stars than that because it's not rewatchable. I don't think the plot is very strong, and the characters are also not very developed. So what I mean when I say that Friday the 13th Part 3 is entertaining is, like, the dynamic between the characters is entertaining. The way that Jason meticulously, like, isolates Chris is entertaining. The way that he kills the other people at the campsite is entertaining. And that's pretty much it. Like, it just feels like a pretty cohesive slasher movie, to summarize. You know who the slasher is. You know who he's after, pretty much. And each person that he kills, like, chronologically makes sense. So there's not, like, the sense of, oh, okay, I'm watching a slasher. Like, for example, Terrifier. I love Terrifier, but there is obviously not, like, a connection between the Terrifier and his victims until later movies. Before that, like, the first Terrifier, he was just going around killing people. And yes, it was entertaining, but it didn't feel like a story, if you get what I mean. Now, as for the soundtrack, I think I said this earlier, but the theme that plays when Jason is around is amazing, and I will always say that. It's amazing. That that shit is creepy as fuck. So that pretty much sums up my review and rating for Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. And I just want to clarify, I don't think this is necessarily a bad movie. It's just not that good to me. And we can have different opinions on that. I understand that Friday the 13th is a classic franchise. My oldest brother loved Friday the 13th, which is why I wanted to watch this movie, and I'm into horror in general. But Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D was just not that good, in my humble opinion. Like, you don't empathize or care for any of the characters in this movie at all. The plot is kind of non-existent, really. Like, in the first Friday the 13th, we understood that Jason Voorhees' mom was, like, getting her lick back because the camp, what are they called? Camp counselors let her son drown in the lake. Go off, Diva, we understand. But in Part 3, I don't really understand why he specifically targets Chris, if there is any reason. And I don't really care either. It's also not rewatchable to me because the effects aren't that good, given obviously it's an older movie, and also it being in 3D is a little disorienting. But beyond that, once you know what happens, it's just kind of boring. Like, we know at the end of the day there's going to be a final girl, and that's going to be Chris. And if you've already seen how everyone else is killed, it's not really interesting to rewatch it again, especially because it kind of drags on and there are a lot of unnecessary scenes, in my opinion. That's all I have for Malia's Room today. I hope you enjoyed. Annyeong, au revoir, adios, and bye.